I went to a medium-sized university in upstate New York. Nothing fancy, but the science department had decent funding, so I ended up working as a night assistant in one of the research buildings. It wasn't a glamorous job, mostly locking up labs, running AV gear for late lectures, and sitting around doing homework. One night about 2 years ago, something happened that I still can't explain. It was around 9:30 p.m., and I was trying to find an open printer. The one in our building was down, so I crossed over to the psychology wing, which was connected by this long interior hallway. Normally, the psych building closes by 8, but I had keycard access and figured I'd just be in and out. I cut across the atrium and into the main corridor. It's one of those newer halls with glass walls and numbered doors. At the end, there's a big double door that usually leads into Hall A, the general lecture wing. But that night, the signage was different. Instead of Hall A, it said Hall G. At first, I thought it was just a labeling error or a maintenance overlay. But when I pushed through the doors, I didn't recognize anything. The hallway beyond looked old, like 1980s old. Green tile floor, beige painted concrete walls, heavy wooden doors with frosted glass windows. All the lights were on, but everything felt off. There were no people, no voices, no sounds from nearby classrooms. I stood there a second, a little weirded out. The air felt heavier, staler. I told myself it was just an old part of the building I hadn't seen before, maybe storage or old classrooms that hadn't been renovated. I walked in further, looking for any kind of office or copy room. There were doors on both sides, most of them shut. A few were open just enough to show empty rooms inside. No desks, no lights, just echoey tile and pipes overhead. At the end of the hallway was a sign over a door that read G114. I remember that clearly because the number felt off. Our campus didn't go past D sections, and I had never once heard of a Hall G. I kept walking. The deeper I went, the more wrong it felt. There was no ambient sound, no HVAC hum, no buzzing lights, no echo of footsteps, mine or anyone else's. Just silence, like everything around me was padded or hollow. I stopped near one of the open doors and looked inside. It was a classroom, at least it looked like one. Chalkboard, rows of old desks, the kind with metal legs and fake wood tops. But everything had dust on it. Not just a little, like inches thick. No footprints, no signs anyone had been in there in years. That's when I noticed something that really messed me up. There were names scratched into the chalkboard. Not written, scratched in, like with a key or blade. 5 names, first and last, all in caps. But the one that made my stomach drop was mine. Same first and last name, same spelling, just there in the middle. I stepped back fast, suddenly very aware of how quiet it was. I turned to leave, but the hallway looked longer now. Not physically longer, just further. Like the exit had pulled back, or the light near the door was dimmer than before. I picked up the pace. The doors along the hallway were now slightly more open than they had been, just enough to show the black inside them. At one point, I swear, I saw something move in one of the rooms. Just a shadow, but not mine. I started jogging. My footsteps finally echoed, but weirdly, like they were bouncing off a tunnel, not walls. The corridor around me didn't even look the same. The tiles had changed to dull gray, and the paint on the walls had started peeling like it hadn't been maintained in decades. I reached the doors I came through, pushed them open, and I was back in the main psych wing. Bright white lights, posters on the walls, sounds of someone moving a cart somewhere around the corner. I turned around. The sign over the door said, Hall A. I stood there for a long minute, just staring at it. Later that night, I checked the campus building maps online and in the security office. No mention of Hall G, no blueprints, nothing. I asked a janitor I knew if there had ever been a renovation or older wing under that name. He looked confused and said the building had been the same since he started, back in '98. I didn't tell him what I saw. A week later, I went back, during the day this time. Everything looked normal. Same corridor, same signage. Hall A. I even found room 114. It was a normal lecture room with modern desks, projector, whiteboard. No chalkboard, no scratches, no dust. I haven't been back to that hallway at night since. But a few months ago, I got an email from the university's IT department saying my name had been flagged in a corrupted server log for room G114. They said it was probably a glitch tied to an old archival system, and not to worry. But the timestamp on the log, it was the same night I went in, 9:44 p.m., and I was only in there for maybe 5 minutes. But that log, it showed me signed in for over 2 hours. I work the night shift as a data analyst in a downtown office building. 12 floors up, fluorescent lighting, dead quiet after 6 p.m. It's not exactly thrilling, but it pays well, and no one bothers me. That's how I like it. About 3 weeks ago, I started noticing something strange. The hallway near the supply room ended in a wall. It always had. But one night, I saw a door where there wasn't one before. A plain beige door with no sign, no handle, just a push bar. I assumed it was a janitor's closet or maintenance access. I ignored it at first. But the next night, it was opened barely, just a sliver. Enough to show darkness beyond it. There were no lights inside, and no sound, just black. It gave me a weird feeling, like walking into a church at night. Still, I didn't go near it. That changed a few days later. I had stayed later than usual, almost 3 a.m., finishing a data migration. I stepped out to stretch and spotted the door wide open. A cool breeze came from the darkness inside. Not cold, cool, like a basement or a freezer that had been unplugged. I called out, "Hello?" thinking maybe security left it open. No response. I stood there staring at the opening. It felt wrong, like the hallway had shifted somehow. The silence pouring from that room wasn't just absence of noise, it was like sound had been erased. My breathing sounded muffled. My footsteps didn't echo like they usually did. Curiosity won. I stepped inside. There was no light switch, just a large empty room, maybe 20 by 20 feet, carpeted like the hallway. Same beige walls, but it was darker, like the shadows clung to the corners, and the silence was total. Not quiet, total. I couldn't hear myself walk. I clapped once, no sound, nothing. That should have been my cue to leave. Instead, I stepped further in. My phone light barely touched the far wall. There were no windows, no vents, just the room. Then my phone buzzed in my hand, a calendar reminder. I glanced at the time, 4:42 a.m. I had only been in the room for 2 or 3 minutes, right? I backed out fast, heart pounding. The hallway outside sounded normal, buzzing lights, faint hum of ventilation. But something had shifted. I felt like I was being watched, like the silence from the room had followed me. I told myself I'd imagined the time thing. Sleep deprivation. That kind of silence. Probably just heavy soundproofing. But the next day, the door was gone. Not closed. Gone. Where it had been was just the beige wall. No seam, no indentation. I even knocked. nothing hollow behind it, like it had never been there. I asked the janitor, casually, if they'd seen a storage room near the supply closet. He looked confused. There's no room there. Always been a solid wall. I didn't sleep that day. The next week it came back. Same door, same angle, half open. This time, I didn't hesitate. I brought a flashlight, stepped inside. The silence wrapped around me again, thick and complete. This time, I left my phone's stopwatch running. I was determined to time it. I walked the perimeter of the room. The flashlight flickered a few times. The walls were seamless. No outlets, no markings. Then, as I passed what I thought was the far corner, I noticed something different. The floor sloped slightly. Not much, just enough that I hadn't noticed before. But it dipped down, almost like a ramp. I followed it. The room stretched longer than it had before. That made no sense. Physically, it shouldn't extend past the building's exterior wall. But it did, and the slope kept going. I turned to go back, and that's when I saw it. The door was gone. Behind me, just wall. The same seamless beige wall. I ran forward, flashlight jerking in my hand. My breathing echoed strangely now, like it was starting to return in patches. But the air felt thick, pressed in. Panic rose fast. I ran, turned again, and then I was back at the center of the room. The flashlight caught something on the wall I hadn't seen before, a smear, like a handprint, but long stretched fingers, as if someone had dragged it down the wall. It looked old, faded, dry. I backed away, and that's when the lights came on. Just like that, fluorescent overheads flickering to life, harsh and buzzing. The room now looked like an empty conference space, but there were no chairs, no outlets, no vents, just that single smear. The door had reappeared. I didn't question it. I bolted out. Back in the hallway, I checked my stopwatch. 2 minutes, 45 seconds. I checked my phone clock. 7:12 a.m. I had lost nearly 3 hours. That was 2 nights ago. I haven't gone near that hallway since. But last night, I got a call from building security. They said the motion sensors picked up movement in the 12th floor west corridor, my floor. But no one else had access at that hour. They asked if I had gone back in. I lied and said no. I checked the footage myself today. The cameras near the hallway glitched. Frames skipped. When they returned, the door was visible for a moment, then static, then nothing. I requested maintenance to check the area. They filed back this afternoon. No door, no entry point, seamless wall. I don't know what that room is. It's not part of the floor plan. It moves or disappears, and it eats time. I haven't told anyone else, because I don't think they'll believe me. Hell, I barely believe it. But last night, I had a dream. I was back in the room. The silence was absolute. I saw myself, standing in the corner, eyes wide, unmoving, just watching me, like I'd been there for years. When I woke up, my phone's screen was lit. A calendar reminder was open. Meeting in the silent room, 3 a.m., and it was already 2:47. I live in the city, so I use the subway almost every day. I've gotten used to the late-night crowd, quiet, tired people, the occasional drunk commuter, and that eerie stillness when the platform empties out. It's part of life here. But a few months ago, something happened that made me stop taking the train altogether. It was a Thursday. I had worked late at my job downtown, and missed my usual 11:40 p.m. train by less than a minute. I stood there watching the taillights disappear into the tunnel and sighed. The next train wasn't until after midnight, and I really didn't want to wait. That's when I remembered the connecting tunnel. At my station, which I won't name, there's an emergency pedestrian passageway that runs parallel to the tracks and connects to the next station about a half-mile away. It's closed to the public, but I'd seen maintenance workers use it, and a security guy once told me there was a back entrance from one of the side stairwells. No one really talks about it. I figured, why not? I went down a side corridor, past a janitor's closet, and an old metal gate that was usually locked. That night, it was slightly open. There was no one around, no signs posted, just the hum of the lights and the faint roar of the train I'd missed. I slipped through and started walking. At first, it was exactly what I expected, just a long industrial corridor with concrete walls, maintenance piping overhead, and dim orange lighting every 30 feet or so. It smelled like damp metal and old air. My footsteps echoed weirdly, like the tunnel was bigger than it looked. I walked for what felt like maybe 5 minutes. That's when I noticed something strange. There were no turns, no exits, and no signs. Nothing at all to show I was getting closer to the next station. Just more tunnel, and the lights were starting to flicker. Not just one, all of them. In rhythm, like a slow mechanical pulse. I stopped and checked my phone. No service, no time. Just a black bar at the top of the screen, where the signal should have been. I tapped it, shook it. Nothing. It was like the phone was frozen. Not dead, just stuck. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not mine, behind me. I turned around fast. The tunnel was empty, completely empty. I called out, half expecting security or some worker to be messing with me. Nothing. I kept walking, faster now. But it felt like the tunnel was stretching. The further I went, the less I believed there was an end. And then I started seeing the signs. Not proper subway signage, just white painted words on the wall, hand lettered in blocky black. No exit. Stay still. Don't talk to them. I stopped again. I felt cold, like I was sweating but chilled underneath. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears. I turned around to go back. And I wasn't alone anymore. Far down the tunnel, maybe 30 or 40 feet, I saw a shape. Just standing there, too still to be normal, human-sized but wrong somehow. Too tall or too thin. It wasn't moving, just standing in the flickering light. I said, "Hello?" It tilted its head, not like a person trying to hear, more like a puppet, a stiff, unnatural motion. Then it started walking toward me, slowly, deliberately. I ran. I sprinted down the tunnel in the direction I thought was forward. My legs burned, and the lights buzzed louder and faster, strobing as I passed under each one. The walls started changing. The pipes were gone. The tiles had turned smooth and pale gray, like concrete in a parking garage. The air got colder. I passed another figure. This one was sitting against the wall, face down. Dressed like a commuter, jeans, backpack, but frozen, like it had been there for hours. I didn't stop. Eventually, I saw a stairwell ahead, a red exit sign above it. I didn't think. I just ran up. It opened onto a platform, but not the one I expected. This station was wrong, old, abandoned looking. The walls were cracked, the benches were rusted, and there were no advertisements, no noise, just the sound of dripping water and a faint hum in the distance. I turned around. The stairwell I came through was gone. Just a tiled wall. I started to panic. I yelled. I kicked the wall. Nothing. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time from the tunnel to the left. I ducked behind one of the benches and held my breath. Someone walked out. But it wasn't someone. It looked like a person, wearing a jacket and slacks. But the movements were off. Like it didn't understand how joints were supposed to work. It moved stiffly, head twitching every few steps, pausing like it was listening. I stayed perfectly still. Eventually, it wandered to the far end of the platform and disappeared down the tunnel. I waited another full minute, then made a run for the opposite stairs. They worked. I climbed up 3 flights and burst into the street. It was 2:23 a.m. I had entered the tunnel around 11:50 p.m. My phone still said, "No service." It didn't fix itself until I restarted it twice. When I got home, I tried to find out what station I'd come out at. None of the city maps matched what I saw. No station in that area had that layout. And that exit stairwell, it didn't exist on the transit schematics. I've checked. I've asked people who work for the MTA. No one has ever heard of that connecting tunnel. Not in any official capacity. A week later, I found a thread on a transit forum talking about phantom tunnels, passages between stations that aren't on maps. Most people think it's just urban legend. But in the comments, someone posted, "If you ever find yourself in a tunnel with no signage and flickering lights, and the walls start changing, turn around. And for God's sake, don't talk to them." Same wording as what I saw painted on the wall.
If you enjoyed these chilling tales and want more true horror stories from the shadows, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Hauntica, and tap the bell icon so you never miss what's lurking next. Your support helps keep the darkness alive and the stories coming.